Hey everyone, and in this video we'll be looking at API routes in NextJS. So what are API routes? API routes provide a way or a solution to build your API, and they are a way to create serverless functions that can help you handle HTTP requests. And what are serverless functions? Serverless functions are a type of cloud computing technology that allows developers to create and run code without having to worry about managing the underlying infrastructure. In the context of API routes, these serverless functions are JavaScript functions that run on a serverless architecture, which means that the hosting provider manages the server infrastructure, scaling, and availability of that function. And the main advantage of using serverless functions for API routes is that you don't have to worry about managing servers or scaling or availability, because the host provider is the one who's going to take care of all that for you. And they are much more cost effective than a traditional server-based solution. So you only pay for the exact amount of resources that your function is going to consume, and you don't have to pay for idle server time. So that's it. That's literally what we need to know about API routes. So other benefits of using API routes in Next.js is that you can easily integrate them with your client-side code. That means you can fetch them. You can fetch data from your API route using the beauty fetch API, just like you would consume any other traditional API. So in this video, we'll be creating API routes for our watchlist functionality, to retrieve movies in our watchlist, to add movies to our watchlist, and to also remove movies from our watchlist. So let's get started. Okay, before we get started, we will be needing to reconfigure our NextJS configuration file. So the purpose of doing this is because we want to retrieve the ID from our user object to authenticate it, and that will require us to customize the authentication flow. So let's get straight to it. So we're going to customize our callback, which is going to modify the JWT, which is JSON Web Token that is going to be issued to the clients. So I'm going to customize the JWT and let's just get straight to it. So when I do that, I'm going to explain the purpose of that. So pages, API of the next one. And right above it here, we're going to the JWT callback. So first, I will think keyword JWT and then token and user. Okay, and I have a comma here. So in here, user token. That's user, ask user 2x. And down here, we're going to return our token. And then right in here, we're going to say session magically equals to this object. And down here, we're going to say session. So I'm going to explain what this is going to do. So the JWT callback function is defined as an asynchronous function with two parameters, token and user. The token parameter represents the JWT that was generated when the user has logged in, and user parameter represents the authenticated user objects. So inside the function, we are checking to see if our user exists, if it's authenticated, and if it's authenticated, we add it to our token object by setting the property of token, which is token the user, to the user object. So this literally translates to the user object being included in our JWT payload. And finally, the modified token object is returned from the JWT callback, and this modified token will be sent to the client, allowing the client to have access to the user object. Okay, and the session callback is then called after a session has been established for a user and receives the parameters, session and user, And the session parameter is the session object that was generated, and the user parameter is the authenticated user object. And yeah, we modify what needs to be what needs to be done, and now we should have complete access to most of the important items that we need for our user. In our case, we need the user's ID. So let's see that. So I'm going to head to localhost. I'm going to refresh. Okay, and then I'm just going to open my console. Then I'm going to sign in. Okay, we're having an error because we didn't return the session. So right in here, we're going to return the session. Return session. Save. And I'm going to turn the console and refresh. And you can see I'm signed in, and you can see our user object now has the ID. And because of this change, our navigation is not as clean as we want, because now we have the session, the user, not session, the session like before. So I'm going to quickly head to our layout file on the components, layout, and let's see. So when we're passing session to session to the user, we're going to pass a session with user alone. That should fix our navigation, or header rather. And you can see it has been fixed. So now we've quickly made some corrections to our next auth configuration file. Now let's move to our API route. Now, how do we create an API route? To do that, you let's your pages folder, and under API, you follow the same structure, just like pages. So we're gonna create a file that's going to correspond to the route that we want. So I'm going to API, and I'm going to create a folder. I'm going to call this watchlist, and we're going to create a file index.js. Okay, so that's our API route. So let's test an existing API route. So we have payload.js here, and you can see it's an export default function handler, and it's returning a JSON to the main John Doe. So how do we access our API? We're gonna pass in the have API route API slash hello. When hit enter, you can see we have this JSON object that will be returned right here. Okay, so that's how to access your API. And if you look at the docs here, it says any file inside a folder, page/API is mapped to API and will be treated as an API endpoint instead of a page. Okay, and for an API route to work, you need to export a function as default, aka a request handler, which then receives the following parameters: a rec, which a request, and a response. And we're going to do that immediately. So in our watchlist endpoints, we're going to do just that. So export default async function and handler. I'm going to pass in the request and response, and that's it. So we want to let's quickly just say res status 200 success JSON. I'm gonna say message. You're gonna say hello there and save. You see, it's pretty identical to the hello.js endpoints. So I'm going to go to API. So I'm going to say API slash watchlist, and you can see we have message hello there. So what is our watchlist endpoint going to do? We're simply going to return, when we visit this endpoint, it's supposed to give us a response and an array containing the list of every movie in our watchlist. And under the hood, we're literally just making a request to a database using Prisma. So I'm gonna use Prisma to request every movie in our watch list or every record in our watch list table on Superbase and return it. So it's going to be an API endpoint. So let's get straight to that. Okay. So first we want to get our user. We're going to get our user on the server side. So we're going to use NextAuth to get our user ID, our user objects rather. So we're going to say const, and so just like NextAuth has the get session hook on the front end, on the back end we have the get server session. So we're going to say await get server session, and it takes in 3 parameters: direct, request, response, and our auth options. So our auth options is going to come from our NextAuth configuration file, like you can see here that we exported. So we're gonna type in auth options, and we're gonna get user out of there. So let's quickly make use of that. So we're gonna say res.status 200.json. I'm gonna pass user to it. Okay. So we're gonna quickly reload the page to see if we can get our user object. And yeah, as you can see, we have our ID, the name, our email verified, and our image, our URL. So that's great. You get to know our user from there. But what we need is the ID. We're going to need it in our Prisma, query. Okay. So now we're getting our user. We want to authorize this API route. So only users that are logged in can access this API route. If they are not logged in and they try to access this API route, they are going to be unauthorized. They won't be able to access the data that they are requesting. So we're going to say if there is no user, we're simply going to return res.status. I'm going to give it a 401, and that is status code for unauthorized, and then a JSON object that says error and unauthorized, and save. So if there is no user, we're going to tell the visitor that they are not authorized to access any watch list. So now we're going to write the logic to fetch or to get our watch list from the database. Okay, so let's do that. So our Prisma query is going to retrieve the watch list for a specific user based on the user ID. So in other words, fetching every movie on that watch list will belonging to our user based on the user ID we pass to it. Okay, so let's do that. So we're going to create a variable const user watch list is going to be equals to await and then Prisma. So you're going to import Prisma, which was the instance that we exported. Remember, we're going to use that instance every application instead of instantiating a new Prisma client. So Prisma dot watch list. So this exposes CRUD, creates, read, update, and delete operations for the watchlist model. So the watchlist, and then dot find many. So find many is going to find more watchlist that matches our query we're going to define soon. We're going to pass an object, and this find many method is used to find multiple records from the watchlist table that matches our specified query criteria. So when we write our query criteria, we're passing in where, maybe a little bit of filter. And what's this query? So it's going to be where user ID is the same as our user.id. So where are we getting user.id from? User.id is this one we are seeing right here in our browser. User. This is the user object that's being shown here, and then the ID key results the first one here. So that's what we have here. So I think const user what is equals to wait. Prisma.watchlist and find meaning where the user ID matches the user ID that we're getting. That's from our authenticated user. And then we are going to pass it. Instead of this user, they're passing a JSON, we're going to pass user watch list. So let's look at our API action, our API route action. So I'm going to reload this page. As you can see, we have this empty array because, of course, we've not added anything to our watch list at all. So our watch list table is empty. So we are okay to have this array. So that's that. We've implemented the API route, which is fetching every user's watch list. Now we're going to write the endpoints for adding movies to a watch list. So how do we do that? So we are going to first of all handle a post request, and we're going to first check in our API route if the request method is a post request. If it's not, we wouldn't do anything. If it's a post request, we're going to extract the necessary data from the request body using object destructuring, and then we check if there's already an existing watch list item in our table, on our database rather, for the user and that movie using the find unique method from Prisma. And if an existing watch list item or a movie is found, the function will return a response with the status code that says that this movie that we want to add to your watch list already exists. So if there is no existing item, or if that movie we want to add does not exist in our watch list already, we're going to add that item or that movie to our watch list using the prisma.create method. And after that, we're going to return a 201 status code and an object containing a message and a status that says, yes, you've added this movie to your watch list. So let's get straight to that. So we're going to work on this, change this code a bit. So the way it's going to work, first we're going to check this API route if the request method is a post request. If it's a post request, we're going to write a logic that's going to add a movie or that a body that's coming along with a post request to our watch list. If it's not a post request, then it's going to be a get request, and the get request is going to run what we just implemented here, which is going to fetch every item in the user's watch list. Okay, so let's get straight to that. So right at the top here, after checking if the person who is trying to access the API route is authenticated or not, I'm going to say if our request we're getting it from the handler, our request that method, if it's equals to post, what do we do? So we are first going to destructure the request body. So remember, we're making a post request, also passing along a body to that post request. We're going to capture it from here. So let's have an idea of what we're going to capture. So if you go to our Prisma schema file, you can see, and you scroll to our watch list, you can see we're expecting a movie ID, the name, the rating of that movie, and the user ID, of course, and the poster image. Okay, so we're going to handle that right here. So how do we do that? We're going to use object destructor like I earlier said. We're going to say const. And how do you access the request body? You simply say rec.body. Okay, so back in here, we're going to destructure what we want. So we're expecting movie ID, name, the rating, the poster, and the user ID. Okay, and we save. So that's the first thing we're going to do. And now we're then going to check. So we're going to say check for existing watch list item. So we're simply checking if the movie that we want to add to our watch list, if it already exists in our database. If it doesn't exist, we add. So we're simply checking if the movie we want to add already exists in our watch list. If it exists, we return a message that says, oh, this movie already exists in your watch list. But if it doesn't, we add to our watch list. So let's handle this condition. Let's check first. So we're going to say const existing watch list is going to be await Prisma dot watchlist dot find unique. Okay, and we pass in an object, and where we're going to filter for that particular movie. So we're going to have we're going to say user ID underscore movie ID, and then the movie ID is coming from the request body, and the user ID that we're passing in the body too. We're going to save. Okay, then we're going to say if there's an existing, that means if we finally get something from this query, if a movie exists there, we're going to return res.status, and the perfect status code for this situation is going to be 409, and say that JSON, and we're going to return an object where the first key is going to be message, and message is going to be already exists watchlist. Okay, and then the last one is going to be a status, and status is going to say existing. Okay, so if there's a movie already existing, we're simply going to return a status code and a message and a status. Okay, so now we're going to go out of this condition. Okay, so what we're going to right now is going to run if that item we want to add doesn't already exist. Okay, so we're going to say const new new watchlist to be equals to await Prisma dot watchlist dot create. So I'm going to create a new watchlist item. Okay, and we're going to pass in data, which is data we need to create that new watchlist item. I will pass in what we have from our request, but just pass in movie ID, name, rating, poster, and lastly our user ID. But just to be sure, we're gonna pass in user.id from our authenticated user. Okay, and that's literally it. So one last thing, we are going to return the status. Okay, so right here, we'll then say res.status, and this state is going to be 201 dot JSON, and we're going to pass an object again. I'm going to say message, and the message here will be added to watch lists, and then the status is going to be success. I'm gonna one last thing is the watch list key, where we're going to return again the new watch list that we just added. Okay? So yeah, we are good to go. So what we did was first of all we captured the items we want to add to our watch list, and first of all we checked if that item already exists. Okay, and right, if it exists, we are going to skip it, and we're going to say this item exists in the watch list already. And this what we have it is user ID underscore movie ID is called a compound unique identifier, okay, which is created by combining two separate fields. Remember, in our schema we have user ID here, we have movie ID. So we combine them together to filter through to find any movie that has the movie ID and that user ID together, and that's what we did to filter through. And that's what we used to find or filter through our table for any movie that exists in our watch list. So if it exists, we're going to return this message saying the movie already exists in the watch list, but we won't add it. Or else, if that movie that we try to add does not exist already, we simply create a new watch list, and we literally passed in the data from our request body, okay? And we then returned a success status code and the JSON message saying a JSON object containing a success message, a success status, and then the item we just created. And we created our watchlist item using the Prisma.create method, which simply inserts a new record into our watchlist table in the database. Okay, and that's literally it. And we've simply created an API route that handles a post request to add a movie to a watch list. And we have one more thing. So remember, we are checking if the request method is post rather. Okay, so we're gonna go to the bottom here and just say else. So if it's not a post request, else it should run this get request that we defined earlier, which is going to get the list of movies in our watch list. So let's reload our endpoint. It's still going to work. The get path is still going to work. And as you can see, we are still getting the list or an array of items from our watch list, which is still empty because we've not added anything yet. So lastly, we are going to add an API route that's going to handle a delete request. So this is going to this request is going to delete movies from our watch list. So it's going to be a dynamic API route. And a dynamic API route is an API route that contains dynamic segments in URL. And this means that the route can accept URL parameters, which can then be used to fetch or modify data on the server. Okay, so in NextJS, we define dynamic API route by placing brackets around the dynamic segments of the route URL. Okay, so it's literally similar to the dynamic routes that we handle when we're creating our movie detail page. Let's create one for our watch list. We're going to go to our under our watch list folder. And we have index. We're going to create another file. And say id square bracket id .js, and this is going to be our dynamic API route. And whatever is going to be passed after our, so it's literally going to be there. So API / watchlist / let's say if it's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, we're literally going to that's the handler that's going to handle whatever we pass after our watchlist. So we want to capture whatever is going to be right here, which we are expecting to be our movie ID or our EMS version ID, and we grab that and then we pass it to our handler, and then we use that EMS version ID to search through our table and delete any movie in our watch list that has that ID. Okay, so let's do that. So we are going to handle a delete request to remove a movie from the watchlist endpoint. And we're going to first of all check if the request is delete, of course. And we're going to extract the movie ID from the request query using the structuring assignment. And then we're then going to attempt to delete the watchlist item corresponding to the user and the movie ID by using the Prisma delete method, using the appropriate condition, of course. So let's quickly do that. So right up here, I'm going to say export default async function and then our handler. Alright. And of course, we're going to first of all get our user. It's a const. I'm going to get user from get server session and pass. We should get it, which I'm importing from next off. So rec, res, and our auth options. Okay, and then we're going to catch user right out of there. Great. So we're first of all going to get our ID from there too. So I'm just going to say const user. Or let's just keep going. So I'm going to first of all check if the request method is it deletes request. So if rec.method is equal to is capital, it refers to delete. So if it is, we're then going to grab the query ID. This is dynamic API route. So we're going to grab it. And how do we grab it? Just like our get server side props, we're going to grab it from the query object. So in that case, we request those query. Okay, so we're going to destructure it by saying const and get ID from our request dot query. In get server side props, I just done query, but here we're going to say request or query, and we have the ID ball. We're going to call it movie ID here. Okay, now we've done that. We're going to have a try catch block, and this try catch block is going to handle the operations that are going to be our database operations. So the try block here, we're going to say const. We're going to create a variable called delete watchlist, okay? And we're going to try to delete that movie from our watchlist using the movie ID. I say await Prisma, which we're going to import, then watchlist dot delete, and we pass an object, okay? And we're going to say where. Again, we're going to use our composite, our unique composite identifier, user ID, movie ID, okay? And we're going to pick that movie ID that we're getting from our request object, okay? Movie ID, and then the user ID. So the user ID is going to be user dot ID. So the user is the one we are grabbing from get server session. Okay, so that's literally it. So if this happens, that may be successful. We're gonna say res.status of 201 JSON, of course. Send an object with a message that says watch list item deleted, and a status of success. You call it deleted if you want. Then data, that's what we delete. I'm going to say delete watch list. So that's that. So you're going to catch an error. Pass an error here. And move down. Give it some space. Move down. So there's an error. We're going to say res.status of 500 as a JSON, and the message is going to be error removing from watch list, and pass a status of error, and we're good to go. Okay, so one last thing. So after checking if we've first of all checked if the request method is a delete method, then we run our delete logic. But now we want to run something else in case the method that was passed to this endpoint or this API route is not a delete request, a delete method. So we are going to set the header of the response to delete using the res.setHeader method, and which is going to inform the client that only the delete method is allowed for this particular endpoint. Okay, and after that, I'm going to return the response, the status code of 405, which stands for method not allowed, along with a message saying that the HTTP method used is not allowed for the endpoint. So that's something pretty neat. So after our if condition here, let's say else res.set header, and I'm going to say allow, and I'm going to press square brackets, let's say delete, and then right below, I'm going to say res data status of 405 and a JSON with a message that says method not allowed, and we are good to go. And we've implemented the API route to handle the deletion of movies from our watch list. And in the next part of our videos, we will be consuming these API routes that we've defined. So first off, we've looked at what API routes are, which are serverless functions. And as you can see here, we've defined an API route for our watch list, which is going to handle fetching or retrieving movies we've added to our watch list in our database, and a post request to handle adding movies to that